Thank you everyone for joining us. I am thrilled to welcome you all to our first event of the year for the AIA Women in Architecture Committee for AIA Silicon Valley, as well as AIA San Mateo joint event, career building workshop. We have three excellent professionals who we'll introduce to you in just a moment, who are going to be sharing their best practices, tips and tricks on interview skills, resume and portfolio preparation, as well as positioning and networking tips. I'm Kate Conley. I am the principal of Architects Fora based in San Jose, California, and I am also the 2022 chair of the AIA Silicon Valley Women in Architecture Committee. So on behalf of our entire group, I'd love to welcome you all. I wanted to share a little bit about what we have going on in the Women in Architecture Committee this year before we get started. If any of you are interested in joining us, this is going to be a really exciting year. We have monthly meetings and that any of you are welcome to attend at any time. Just reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect you. But really, when we were setting our goals for the AIA committee this year, our group decided to make the theme of this year building confidence. And so we agreed to prioritize confidence building and inspiration-based events, which is really where we felt our committee sung in the past. And so one of those, this kind of branched out into three different topics, one of which was a kind of rededication to supporting women, minorities, and young architects. And we felt the best way that we could do that this early in the year was to do a reprisal of the career building workshop that we did last year that was on these same three topics. And so we're happy to welcome all of the emerging professionals who are here tonight. And of course, we're here to answer any of your questions as well. Also, we have a really exciting event coming up in April on the 14th at the Computer History Museum at the Architectural Intelligence Conference. It's a one-day in-person conference that's jam-packed with amazing speakers. I happen to be one of them, and we will be talking on a variety of topics focused primarily on sustainability, equity, and inspiration. So we hope that you'll all join us for that event as well, and we can give anyone who's interested more information. But of course, you can always go to the AIA Silicon Valley website under events, and you'll be able to find the Architectural Intelligence Conference and register there. Now I'd like to pass it off to our events director, Sherry, to talk a little bit about the events that we have planned for the year.
Hi everyone, so happy to be here tonight. I'm Sherry Sajapur with JK Architecture Engineering. And as Kate said, the 2022 Director of Events for our WIA chapter. So March, as you see on the calendar, we have this career building workshop, and April is the AI 22. That would be followed by June, which is the Building Confidence event along the same theme. That's a workshop that's focused, it's like around a book called The Confidence Code. So if you do get a head start, want to start reading it, go ahead. I did the audio and watch out for flyers. We're going to have more information on it before the event. We are planning on one-on-one mentorship meetups for the summer. Again, details of that will be sent over, so keep an eye. And my favorite event of the year, which is a national event in September, Women's Leadership Summit. So that's just the lineup that we have planned for 2022.
Excellent. Thanks, Sherry. Now I'd like to invite the San Mateo County chapter to share what you have planned for the year as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anne Marie Tahaney. I'm the Associate Director for AIA San Mateo County. And we've got some exciting stuff. Our year goals, we kind of refocused on advocacy again this year. And so we have a bunch of events that have city planners that we want to engage with and talk more about SB 9 and SB 10. We are continuing with the AIA national goals that we find important as well, which are the climate change, housing, and equity, diversity, inclusion. So we have committees for those that are doing great work. We also are focusing again this year on housing issues and ADUs and affordable housing. A lot of our content this year is going to be surrounding that, tours and some great lectures that we have planned. And so we have virtual on-demand events that we can that people can join as well as watch later. And then our tours have been pretty fantastic. So next slide, Kate. Thanks. March, we have our event coming up is Making Affordable Homeownership a Reality. And Habitat Greater San Francisco, Maureen Sidonin is going to be discussing affordable housing and homeownership and home building. And they have some great projects that we have a tour of coming up later in our year. But she's a pretty fantastic speaker. And so we're looking forward to that in March. Next slide. And then our Committee on the Environment event is Josh Becker. And he is going to be talking about climate policy and legislation and heading towards carbon neutrality. And so we're pretty excited about that event coming up in April. And then we have our tours that we're going to be having late spring and fall. The Uber tour is going to be pretty fantastic. We're all looking forward to that one. And the Habitat for Humanity Diamond Heights project, which we'll be hearing about a little bit during that March presentation. We'll get a follow-up tour. So
Excellent.
Back to you, Kate.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Sherry, you were going to introduce our speakers, correct?
Yes,
Great.
I am. So I'm pleased to introduce our three speakers for tonight. The way it's structured is we have three segments, starting with positioning tips, resume and portfolio review, and then interview skills. So the first segment will be presented by Mani Farhadi. She has more than 30 plus years of experience in design, programming, and planning educational facilities. Currently senior facilities planner at Stanford University School of Medicine, and also a very active member of our Women in Architecture Silicon Valley. Next, we have Mr. Richard Smith. He is a principal at CAS Architects in Mountain View and an instructor at West Valley College. He will be giving us tips and tricks on resume and portfolio review. And the third speaker, Pamela Anderson Brulé. She is the founder of Anderson Brulé Architects, FAIA, I should mention that. And her work has been dedicated to public architecture with focus on community, education, health and wellness, and housing architecture. I'm very pleased to have this lineup. Learning objectives. I'm not going to read all of it for you, just you can read it, but just highlights. It's basically tonight provides support and guidance for emerging professionals as you navigate the profession, learning to network and building self-confidence. Also tips and tricks on creating resumes and portfolios that align with your individual skills and interests. Also, again, tips and tricks to students and emerging professionals to begin to build their careers by coaching them and providing recommendations on improving your interview skills. And last but not least, gain technique to grow the visibility and increase the value of audience members through small interactive breakout groups. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Mani. Take it.
Thank you, Sherry, for the introductions. Can everyone hear me? Great. I'm super excited to be here, and I'll share a little bit of advice. Next slide on positioning tips. And what I'll say is that
sorry, Mani, it's not
advance.
advancing. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Really networking and kind of has a bad rap, but I'm here to assure you it's not about sales or partying or being an extrovert. You can successfully network if you kind of frame it a little bit differently, and that's what I'm going to try to share with you. So I kind of have 8 categories that I'll share with you, and for each one I'm going to give you a specific example. So first one here, engage early. You can really nurture much more naturally about networking even before you realize it, thinking about what activities got you excited as a kid or what groups did you hang out with. So for example, let's say it was drama and you enjoyed acting in your school productions. Well, how's that going to help your future? It's an activity that methodically brings different people together towards a goal, from auditions to rehearsals to performances. And then keeping in touch with those folks, not just the students, but the grown-ups, someday will lead to connections that will be useful. Next slide. So as an example, my son was in shows since elementary school. When he got to middle school, he stayed in touch with that teacher from elementary school and volunteered to help the kids after school in rehearsals. By the time he got to high school, the teacher had built trust in him and offered to now pay him after school as an assistant director. So what started as a hobby led to a paying job as a teenager in a place that was fun and a specialty that he had developed. And he is now studying acting. So also in college, you want to continue those activities that resonate with you. So that's what networking is find what you like to do. Volunteering for community service, join the AIA student group, a sketching club, work as a TA. Maybe you like to play sports. Again, you wonder, how is that going to help with my future? Well, it's an activity that periodically brings together people towards a goal, from tryouts to practice to tournaments. And keeping in touch with those folks, not just the students, but the grown-ups, will someday lead to connections that can be useful. You can sense a theme here. Next slide. So my other son played volleyball in elementary, middle, and high school. As he got older, he volunteered to coach the younger kids. Eventually, he was hired to be an after-school coach. And he kept in touch with one of the coaches whose son was on a competing team. When they played at club tournaments, he would say hello and be very polite to the father, his former coach. And it turned out this old coach was a CEO of a small startup. And when my son needed a summer internship, he reached out to the guy on LinkedIn. Well, guess what? The CEO had known our son for many years, and so he hired him for his first engineering internship. Next slide. So what I'm trying to encourage you to do is create professional ties with your very first job. This is really important to establish legitimacy and build a network. Now, AIA membership is free for the first 18 months after your graduation, and also most firms pay for AIA membership, especially if you're active in the chapter. So by attending monthly meetings and looking for mentors, or if you're preparing for AREs, you can join a study group. Building this habit from the very beginning of your career, that's going to help you. How, you wonder? Well, it's an activity that periodically brings different people together towards a goal, from webinars to tours to events. And keeping in touch with folks will someday lead to connections that can be useful. I won't say that again, but I just wanted to reinforce it for a third time. So next slide. I have been an associate member of AIA since 1984. That's way before most of you were born. And I found this group resonates with me. And it could have been COAT, which is for the environment. It could have been CRAN, residential architecture. It could have been EP, emerging professionals. But over the years, our members of WIA have been promoted. We've changed jobs, started our own firms, been laid off, gotten married, had children, moved away, retired, or become FAIA. As each transitioned in our careers, we had each other for guidance, questions, support, referrals. In this 2017 photo, I had just gotten laid off, but I had to moderate the panel at the last minute. So that gave me a boost and some presence. One of the women in the photo was recruited by another woman in the photo, I won't say who, after a WIA event. Plus, there are now 2 firm owners in the slide and 3 FAIAs since this photo. So it really works to network. Next slide, please. Seeking affinity groups. So this means that you look for a group that you feel connected to. At these events, you talk to others who have similar interests as you, and conversation will flow much more naturally if it's something that you have in common. And as you get to know people better, you can suggest, can I have an informational interview? Would you mentor me? You can ask them questions about resume writing or salary negotiating or interviewing. You can ask them technical questions about working drawings. You can say, could you introduce me to so-and-so? And the reason to network is really just to find those with whom you're comfortable, right? And this is a springboard for you to other opportunities. Next slide. When you're part of a larger group, it gives you strength. If you think you can't tackle something on your own, or you're not sure how to proceed, you can rely on the support of others to get you through. It could be personally, it could be professionally. So I've been involved with this group, Equity by Design, since 2016. I spoke at their symposium about work-life balance. And in 2018, I spoke about intersectionality and intercultural intelligence. I didn't even know what those words meant until I was asked to speak about it. And since then, I've developed this as a sphere of influence. And I've met incredibly inspiring people and gotten many introductions through that. Next slide. You can also think about your local neighborhood, how to get involved and start building your skills that way, just next door. Connect with your alumni groups. What are they working on? even extended family members. You can use social media, not for like the frivolous posts, but follow those who inspire you. Definitely follow the firms that you're interested in working for. And in the local paper or on Nextdoor, you can read about, or online, read about what's happening in your town. If you're interested in civic architecture or community centers, go to the town hall meetings. How does the space function is one thing, but it's also how do they make decisions? I found out about Leadership Los Gatos, which was a one-year program in my town, and I enrolled in it, and it gave me a certificate and opened up a world of possibilities in my town. Next slide. So you can think about this because also a few years later in my local paper, again, this is dating me, it was newspaper, I saw they were looking for volunteers to serve on the Bond Oversight Committee. Now at work, my projects, remember, were all educational. I was presenting school projects to Bond Oversight Committee members. So I was applied and accepted, and then I got to be on the other side of the table. And now representing my school district, competing firms were presenting to me. So it really definitely helped open my eyes. And for 10 years of volunteering on the BOC, I got a Citizen Architect Award. Then I applied for Board of Trustee position, and I was appointed as a Board of Trustee. Again, not only was I giving back to my community and I felt comfortable because I knew folks and these people had helped me raise my kids, but I got to see firsthand how boards make decisions about planning and projects. I was interacting with teachers and principals, superintendents from other districts who I had known as the architect, but now I was more of an equal because I was also a school board member. Next slide. So as you navigate through, you could develop an area of expertise, something you're interested in, educational projects like I did, or affordable housing, sustainability, construction administration, community engagement, social justice, whatever it is, you know, maybe you want to be a technical whiz. All of these activities will help improve your understanding while they improve your reach. You can also start to write about subjects that interest you and submit proposals to conferences. It's another way of networking because you start attending and going to these conferences and connect with others. For example, our AI conference coming up in April, definitely recommend you attend that. Next slide. So to build my expertise, I asked for training at SCUP, Society for College and University Planning. And the reason was I'd been doing mostly K-12 projects. I wanted to gain more exposure in higher education. The firm sent me to SCUP Planning Institute and I got like a level 3 certificate, but this institute was attended by other universities, right? Folks who were administrators or planners at these other institutions. So again, in an equal setting, we were all students at this workshop. It was not a competitive environment and it helped gain knowledge on higher education, but I also got exposure to a new network of higher education. Next slide. So it's about crafting your career. These networking and positioning opportunities can be deliberate, they can be strategic. If I had worked on city planning projects, maybe I'd volunteer for the Planning Commission instead, or if you work on senior housing, volunteer for a senior group. You really want to enhance your work experience with a higher purpose. Give your spare time to an organization you believe in. It will bring you immense rewards, and you have to do it authentically though. So next slide. I'll quickly give you another example about the International Congress of Women Architects held in Iran in 1976. I attended as a teenager with my late mother. She was not an architect, but an author, and she and my father had written a book about traditional principles of Persian architecture. She was invited to speak about the deeper meaning behind architecture and the spirituality of space, if you will. But there I got to meet Denise Scott Brown, Ann Ting, Jane Drew, Alison Smithson, Guy Valenti, many others from various countries around the world. And they all spoke about the crisis of identity. And they also wrote a resolution saying that women architects must improve the quality of life through architecture. Well, that was it. I was hooked and decided to become an architect, but I also felt a sense of belonging and camaraderie. And I've been trying to recreate that ever since. Next slide. So as you follow these steps, you're going to place yourself in the circumstances on purpose, right? And you're going to have then more choices in your career. The right outcomes will prevail because you're genuinely doing what you're interested in. This time that you spend to build your network is an investment in your own potential. It's going to open up doors that you never thought of because you're placing yourself where you want to be in the environment that makes you thrive. Next slide. So this is my last example. As I was networking with higher education clients and attending conferences, I met someone from leadership at Stanford School of Medicine. In one of our chats, he mentioned, "Hey, we're hiring a senior planner. Do you know anyone?" I thought about it. I realized that after 30 plus years of education projects, I'd always been on the side of the architecture firms. What if I was inside the university? So I said to him, "What about me?" Well, the rest is history, as they say. I interviewed and I was hired 3.5 years ago at Stanford. So I encourage you to go out, find what resonates with you, and it will lead you where you want to go. Thank you. And now I'm going to hand it off to Dick to tell you more about building your skills.
So welcome, everybody. So next. And next again. So I want to start off with a resume. And I think these 4 points are really what make a resume work. And so clarity, kind of a balance between being concise and specific, showing off who you are and tailoring it to your audience. And I'll go into some more details with my sample resume that my friend Tommy volunteered for me to use. So next. So clarity is not trying to crowd the resume with too much graphics, and then being very logical with how you organize it. So for example, the sample, it goes from education to experience to service to achievements to skills. And just, those categories just very clean. And then make sure you include your contact information, your email, your LinkedIn, links to if you have your portfolio online, etc., phone numbers. Next. So I think it's really important that the resume is a single page, that it's not multiple pages. And so organize in a single page, and that you fill it with your accomplishments, but as action verbs. And so I taught this, I collaborate with this, I produce this, I organize this, and really highlight your accomplishments. And so, your GPA if you're a student, class valedictorian, chapter president, best of the show, all these things. This is what you want to put into your resume. And then next, and then showing off who you are. So show your interests, your technical skills. You can do this either as a list, or a lot of times people do kind of a graphic thing where it shows, with this program, your proficiency, and that's perfectly fine. But put in something about your interests and passions, and do not either oversell or undersell you. Most people in the architecture profession have a tendency to undersell, and so you need to appreciate what you do. And then the final thing for the resume is tailor it to your audience. Next. So, with this, you need to customize it. Emphasize your experience that matches the firm. And so this means you do some research and you find out about that firm that you're applying to, and tailor your resume to that. And it's really trying to illustrate what makes you a good hire. So let's go on to the portfolio, and you'll see that there's duplication, and really these things are working all together in concert. And so I think really what makes a great portfolio, well, first the objective is to clearly present your qualifications through your work. And I really do think it's design, organization, qualification, uniqueness, and I want to do a little bit on the workflow. Next. So I think you need to think about your portfolio as a storytelling exercise. And it's really explaining in a narrative really about the projects and about your experience. And so, when I teach, I love the image on the right. It's from a YouTube series called Every Frame a Painting. And this is, it takes apart films. And this is from the quadrant system, where the author talks about how one quadrant of a film speaks to another quadrant. And so the same thing on how you organize your portfolio and the pages of it and the project. The pages talk to each other, and you want to design how people look through the portfolio from the first, where they go with the first view to the second view to the third view. So next. and you want to look upon like all the information that you have as a hierarchy and different scales. And so I think there really is a primary scale, a secondary scale, and a tertiary scale to the information that you put in your portfolio. And the primary is really what is the most iconic. What do you want to remember about that project or about that portfolio? And so typically you would give it more size and more scale in the spread. And then you go there first. And then what is the secondary? How do I move from the primary to the secondary? And maybe these are multiple secondaries, but these are all a part of what's telling the story of the project. And then you move to the tertiary where it's more detailed information, and maybe this is the point where it's a little bit longer to digest and understanding. So maybe this is where the text comes in. And when I teach my class, we go through examples that are outside of architecture. And so on the right is plating from the chef Thomas Keller. And so this is one of the dishes that he prepares. And he follows the scale rules. And so this is a citrus marinated salmon that he prepares. And so you have the primary scale of the salmon, and then you have a secondary scale of orange, and then caviar, and then there's a tertiary scale that the bed that's been set on, there's like a dusting of dried citrus. And so there's all these scales, and you can do the same thing with graphic posters, that these strategies are what people work, and it really does help the storytelling. So, next. So consistency. You want your portfolio to look like it's not assembled by a committee, and it's not you going through different moods, but really that there is consistency to it, and it doesn't matter. And so when I see lots of portfolios, and it can be like, I have to admit I probably are more attracted to kind of the bottom, the lower flowing, kind of more gradual changes and more isolated with white spaces. And like to me, the classic example is of the Swiss designer Massimo Vanelli. But examples like Bruce Mao, where he puts books together, where it's really very staccato and it's more energetic, and that's fine. And then the third example is Tipper Kaltman, who basically alternates between great peaks and valleys. So I have things going on, and then I have slowness and things like that. But the idea is that there is this consistency, and that you're designing the elements of it. So it does look like it's from one person. So design. So next. Organization. The thing with the portfolio, it's relevancy, not chronological. You're not telling your life story to the person you're trying to get a job with. You're trying to show how you're relevant and what makes you special. And so, a way to think of it is different acts. And so you have Act 1, you Act 2, and Act 3. And so, my recommendation is really to have a strong beginning and something memorable at the end. And so maybe Act 1 sort of sets up who you are. Act 2 kind of, to keep using the metaphor, is confrontations, and you might have, different examples of things. And then Act 3 is really a strong project that kind of finishes your portfolio. And there's some analysis that we do in the class of taking apart people's portfolios. Next. It's important that you tailor your portfolio so that, just as you do with the resume, so that it shows to your audience that it's what they're looking for. And so, a typical strategy is that first project is maybe the closest that you have to the work that the firm is doing. So, for example, if it's a housing example, a firm that does housing, multifamily housing, then maybe you put a multi-housing project that you have experience with first, and then maybe you try to end up with something kind of stronger, and maybe it's not quite housing, but it's what you feel is your strongest project, and then you place things in the middle. But the idea is that I'm customizing it to the firm and who I'm talking to. I think you'll see that's a message in everything that we've been talking about. The next. And then uniqueness. Communicate your personality and what's important to you. So it's the same thing with the resume. Do this in the portfolio, and then if you're doing a group project, explain your contribution of that project. Do not overclaim it or undervalue your contribution, but explain what you did and maybe what you brought to the group and your portion. I think is very important. And then so that's uniqueness, and finally the workflow. And so when I teach the class, we use Adobe Creative Suite, and I am a big fan of it because I think it gives you all the different pieces. But there are alternates. There are free alternates out there. But I like using Photoshop as to work and to clean up the images, and maybe Illustrator to create graphics, and then using InDesign as my assembler. And then we typically recommend that you create project pages, and then you use Acrobat to take the pieces and customize it. And so this is where I'm doing my manipulation, where I put that housing project first because I have a page of that project, and I just position it within Acrobat. And whether I print it or submit it, electronically, it's the same customization that you're doing. So, and then next, common mistakes. So, and then what they communicate. So, check spelling and grammatical errors. Because this communicates carelessness on your part. And so one of the steps that I like to do is to take something and print it out in black and white and stick it up on a wall. So change the format, because you get so used to looking at something, you miss things. And then another classic mistake is putting the wrong firm name on the resume or cover letter. I mean, I think all of us here have seen that, and it's not good. It just communicates carelessness and taking that extra, 10 to 15 seconds to check something. A lot of times I look at portfolios and they have blurry images, and this is just maybe you didn't look at the dots per inch of the photograph that you're working with. And then if you're working in InDesign, the classic mistake is that you take your image and you move it from one folder to another folder. And in InDesign, this breaks the link, and you get a very low resolution version of it. Another classic mistake is just using too many fonts, too many sizes. And so the recommendation is typically to do a maximum of 3 fonts and then change size and value. If it's printed, and it is still a world of both printed and electronic portfolios, but if you're printing, a lot of times it comes out too dark or light because you haven't allowed time for test printing. And it looks maybe fine on the screen, but when you print it, it just isn't the same, and you just have to recognize that there's a difference between the screen and the printed page, and that leads to bad color matching. Sometimes things you don't see it because the way you view your monitor is the photons of light are coming directly into your eye, and when you're in a printed page, the light's hitting and bouncing to your eye that way, and so like the black might not be like the black that you see on your monitor is same as the black next to it, but when it's actually coming to you, it looks or the printed, it looks different. And so you query the black, and is it the same black number, the same RGB or something? Another common mistake is a lack of text and labels to guide your viewer. It's really easy to think that something is very obvious and understandable, and it may be to you, but it's not so clear to other people. And so you need to over-label, over-explain something so that it's clear to others, and then not targeting or customizing to your audience. Putting in the effort to learn about the firm that you're applying to and what they do and how you're a good fit. And then, sort of another unforgivable is if you list somebody as a reference, make sure that you talk to them and make sure they're going to be a good reference and that they know you're applying for something. And, this is a part of what Monty said about networking. Keep in contact with your references. They can help you along the path. So, resume and portfolio.
Great. I think I'm up. So hello, everybody. I'm going to be speaking to you about interview skills and really trying to help you think in relatively simple terms. So let's go right into the first slide. So I think one of the things that I want you to think about is the things that you'll need to think about alone. A friend of mine used to say, go sit on a rock and explore who you are. So, but talk to friends and so forth, but really figure out who are you and where do you want to work before you begin interviewing. It is exceedingly important that you think about, you know, what type of firm do you want to be in? Do you want to be in a 1,000-person firm and 300 people in the office, or do you want to be in a 2-person firm? Huge differences. So thinking about, you know, what project, what excites you in a project realm. Are you super excited about residential, or you really want to work on hotels, or you name it, but what is it that you're going to be excited about? Culture is a huge deal, and selecting a firm that you think will be a cultural match to, you know, who you are, but also where you are in your career, because you know, careers are long, and you may start off feeling one way and then move and think about things a different way. I worked for a firm that did all office buildings, and it took me not very long to figure out I did not want to do office towers. It just was not my thing. So I think part of that is then, you know, looking, you know, Mani said it so well, looking into your world and seeing, do you have a contact, or is there a way to make a contact in a company that you're interested in? You know, going to the AI conference and there's all these architects, you know, can you introduce yourself and get to know people that you already know you like the firm, and you're trying to think about who you might meet from that firm. Next slide. So then the next piece I'm going to call homework. You know, we have had interviews with people where it was completely obvious that they'd never looked at our website. They had no idea what we did or what our vision was. We actually had one gentleman that said, well, he got to the front page, but he didn't know there were more than one page. He didn't know how to click into the website. So that was really quickly like, okay, that he's not ready to work anywhere. So I think that do your homework. So you these days it's so much easier than it used to be, but go into that website and read about the firm, and go into their, you know, page about people, and look at their cultural stuff that's going on. Look at the projects they're working on. You know, go back to that, you know, thinking about yourself and ask yourself, you know, am I a match? Well, what sort of requirements are there to work in the firm? And, you know, who are these other people that are working there? You know, location may not seem important anymore because we're all, you know, elsewhere. But there are firms that are now asking people to come back to the main office. So just making sure that you know whether that is going to be a criteria at any point. And certainly logistics in all of our lives are so important. So thinking about, you know, eventually commutes, and eventually, you know, even going to project sites. You know, skills, do you have the skills to be successful in the role that you are applying for? And, you know, one of the things I will tell you is that if you're a student applying into the firm, don't drive yourself crazy with those skills. Your skills will be taught once you're in the firm, but you as a person and being able to explore who you are is important. And then, you know, go ahead and go to Glassdoor, go to places where you can begin to understand what are these positions that are out there, how do I match with them? But, you know, do your homework. Do not show up in an interview without having done your homework. I can guarantee you it will not go well. Next slide, please. In this day and age, you know, thinking about logistics and platforms is really going to be important. Like, you know, it's really okay to ask, who will I be meeting with when I interview? You know, this means you probably sent your resume in. They probably liked your resume. You certainly could ask, you know, so excited to interview. What was it that stood out, for instance, on my resume that caused you to call me? Who might I be meeting with? How much time will I have with the folks that I will be interviewing with? You know, once you know the names of people, and we do this with future clients all the time, is go find out, learn about them, read something they've written, look at their website. So, you know, find out who this person is and what makes them tick. And then these days, you have to know the platform. Are you interviewing, you know, online? What are, you know, is it Zoom? Is it something else? Is it a phone call first? Is it personal interview? All of these things you get to ask. You absolutely should ask, and you should know. And I've been in professional meetings where people are like, oh, I know how to use Zoom, but I don't know how to use Teams. And then, you know, people are spending minutes wasting time because they don't know the platform. So really ask what platform you're going to be in. And if it's in person, you know, it's been a while since we've been in person. You know, the other day I went out for the first time and went, oh my God, I have to think about what I look like 3D, you know, instead of just, you know, from how many have, you know, jogging pants on right now, you know, type of thing. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. So I think, you know, we talked about that beginning step of, you know, thinking about who are you and what makes a fit. But now it's this idea that you have to present yourself to these other people. And it's really a bad idea to present somebody other than yourself. In other words, go in there, be authentic, you know, try to relax as much as you can. But, you know, defining yourself to your future employer is a really important part of making sure it's a match. So I think take the time to actually script it out. Think of questions that you might be asked, try to write some answers down, try to, you know, grab a roommate, grab a parent, whatever, practice a little bit about how you might respond to some of these questions. You know, think about work experience. My daughter, when she applied for a job that needed 4 to 5 years of experience as a graphic designer, she was able to cobble together stories about her internships and her summer jobs that gave them the impression that and really it was real, but that she had experience beyond, you know, just having graduated. Talking about the projects that excite you certainly is great, and certainly, you know, what we just heard from Richard is just wonderful. But be careful that you don't go off in your own little world talking about a project that has nothing to do with what the firm is actually doing. So this idea of, well, why do you want to work there? If your favorite projects are all, I don't know, I'll make a ski resorts, and you go to an interview where it's, you know, homeless shelters, you know, it's like, you know, making sure, you know, there's alignment and being able to talk to why you really want to work there. What is it? What are the reasons that you want to work there? What trends are you seeing that are important to you? Who is who's in the community you follow and admire, for instance, and, you know, your availability to be able to answer, you know, when could you start, or any constraints, and be honest about that, because most firms that are really interested in you, you know, will listen to all of this and kind of put it together to think about how important it is that you work for them. The one other thing I'll add is I forget the data on it, but a lot of architects are introverts, and there are some that are extroverts. And the other thing is that I took a course once on conflict negotiation, and the professor pulled his hair out and said, oh my God, I have to teach you how to be in conflict. None of you know how to be in conflict. And that is an architectural trait as well. So I think, you know, being able to just be yourself, you know, just say, you know, I'm a little nervous right now, or man, this is the first time I've actually been in person for an interview or talked to anybody in the last 3 years. I mean, do something that sort of admits who you are, and that sort of lightens things, and it also makes it easier on you to go through the process. Next slide. So we already talked a lot about the portfolio and what should be in here. You know, you're telling a story. You're telling your story. You're doing it. I hope you do everything that Dick just said, because it's all very, very good stuff. But rehearse this story, this presentation. Focus on the right types of projects that are going to align to the you know, firm that you're meeting with. Paint a visual picture of the process you went through. What was your role? What was your part? You know, how did you collaborate with others? And then be ready to explain details. You're going to be asked questions, and it may be about yourself. It may be about the design concepts you're showing. They may ask you to go a little deeper into you know, the portfolio that you're showing. And certainly you're going to ask your skill sets in literacy of software and what you know how to use and so forth. So these are going to be really important, but doing it as, you know, painting a picture rather than kind of going through this list of things, I think is going to be really important. So remember always that they're interviewing you. You are interviewing them. You are choosing, especially in today, I think you must all know this, but right now it is a seller's market that every firm that I know of is looking to hire people. Therefore, you get to interview them, and to have a full interview where you aren't engaging in questions, you aren't asking the firm really good and important questions, you are not going to stand out as a candidate. Most architectural firms are looking for people that are good at inquiry and good at dialogue and good at presenting themselves and being, being interesting in that conversation. So these are just a small, list of things you could be asking. But at the end of your interview, most firms will ask, do you have any other questions? So let's say while you were listening to the dialogue that was going up, please, even though you may be in a complete fog and sweating and all this other stuff, write down 3 keywords, write down 3 things that interviewee told you. And then use those words backwards. I've heard you talk about culture. Here's, can you tell me more about this? You've talked about this project that the firm is going to be working on and you want me to work on. Can you tell me a little bit more about that project and who the team will be? So I'm just giving you examples of how you can take what they said and then have your questions be related back to having listened to them. Does that make sense? Kind of, because, some of these questions, what's the salary range? They're perfectly fine, but the more you can connect to having heard them and going deeper with what they're telling you, the better off you'll be. And then let's go to the next slide, which is after the interview. And I think, the concept that thank you notes are a dead art, not in the world of getting hired. And not in the world, frankly, but I'm old enough to say that, I think, is that thank you notes are so important. And we do them with our clients after an interview. We write a thank you note. And in it, reiterating things you heard, things that you're interested in, restating why you think this firm is a fit, and is really important. And the thank you note should be short and concise, but pinpointed to what that dialogue with that firm was about. And then if you can try to link in with the people that you interviewed with. There's no better time to not be, even if you're rejected, but there's no better time than to try to build that network so that if you're LinkedIn with somebody and people are like, wow, they're LinkedIn with so-and-so, and that goes back to what Monty was saying, do that as soon as you can, as often as you can, and do it at every meeting that you go to where you start to meet other individuals. So I think that I think there's coming up. In the world where we're all on Zoom and all in virtual worlds, you can really mess this up. Your lighting can be wrong. I've seen that where you can't see the face of the person because they're completely blacked out. And there's, look ahead that the software, how to work it, test it out, test the link, be early, test your sound, your lighting, your background. What's behind you matters. And the colors and the lighting matter too. So I really want you to do that. The other thing I will say is that we have spent a lot of years now dressed from the waist up. Showing up in an interview wearing a t-shirt is just not a good idea unless the company you're interviewing with, everybody's wearing t-shirts, right? So look at that company, look at how they, present themselves and try to align yourself to that. But thinking about, first impressions are lasting, how you want to present yourself professionally is really important.